Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring a pretty fascinating intersection. It's where ancient Eastern philosophy perfectly mirrors modern complexity science to map out a truly sustainable future for global economics. We're going to dive deep into Daesun thought, ancient cosmology, and 21st century systems theory.
To really understand the global economy, we've got to ask a fundamental question first. Is wealth just something to be linearly hoarded, or is it part of a breathing, circulating ecosystem? The source material we're examining today makes a bold claim. It posits that money and resources actually come into existence strictly through a living principle of circulation. It's not just a static object to possess and lock away.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Linear versus circular thinking. 2. Science validates ancient wisdom. 3. The mechanics of circularity. 4. Humanity's role in cycles. And finally, 5. The spiral of growth.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1, linear versus circular thinking.
So, historically, Western thought uses what we call an analytical epistemology. It basically breaks everything down into isolated, independent parts, reducing complex systems to their absolute smallest atoms. It's highly linear and heavily leans on creationism, meaning there's a definite beginning and a definite end. Now, on the flip side, Eastern thought utilizes a correlative epistemology. It views all things as deeply interconnected. Nothing operates in total isolation. It's a holistic, circular view where existence itself is an ongoing process of circulation, not just a one-and-done creation event.
And we've actually seen that purely linear economic models eventually collapse, precisely because they completely disregard these broader natural principles of flowing circularity. The source material points out a really intriguing example here. Marxist economic thought initially gained traction because it touched upon the hidden cycle of gift-giving within classical labor theories. But, as a rigid, linear system, communism ultimately failed. You just can't force a linear framework onto a naturally circular universe without something eventually breaking.
Which brings us to part 2, science validates ancient wisdom.
This quote is incredibly powerful. For centuries, Western science tried to create these exception-free linear laws to explain literally everything, but then came philosopher Bertrand Russell and mathematician Kurt Gödel. Russell discovered paradoxes, proving that language and logic can never really be free of exceptions, and Gödel's incompleteness theorems proved this mathematically. They essentially demonstrated that a self-referencing circular logic is mathematically required to even understand our universe. So those rigid, independent, linear boxes of traditional Western philosophy, they were effectively rendered mathematically bankrupt.
It's absolutely astounding what happened next. Because of those mathematical discoveries, modern complexity science was born. It now relies heavily on a concept called self-organization. This totally abandons that old mechanistic worldview that treats the universe like some lifeless machine. Instead, it views all things as living organisms spontaneously creating new order through continuous feedback loops. So modern science is essentially attaching mathematical formulas directly to ancient Eastern philosophy. It cuts right to the core of the correlative thinking you'd find in the I Ching and the concept of Taiji.
Moving right along to part 3, the mechanics of circularity. According to both modern complexity science and Eastern thought, 5 really is the magic number. It's the mathematical minimum required to achieve a perfectly balanced system of mutual generation and mutual overcoming. You'll often see this known as the 5 phases. Anything less, like, say, a system of 4, simply lacks the symmetrical equilibrium needed to sustain a perpetual, self-correcting cycle.
The foundational mechanic powering this whole system is polarity. In Daesun thought, this is called Yumyong Haptik, or the union of yin-yang virtue. And the crucial takeaway here is that difference isn't about conflict, it's about creating a unified engine of harmony. Take water and fire, complete opposites, right? Yet they don't just destroy each other, they actually require each other to drive the system forward. It's like the ultimate engine of harmony.
The texts give us a really beautiful way to visualize this flowing circulation, the fountain metaphor. Picture water gathering quietly at the bottom of a pool. That's your conserving, yin energy. Then, fueled by heat or yang energy, it bursts vigorously upward. It spreads out horizontally and finally falls vertically right back into the pool. It forms this continuous dynamic cycle where water and fire, descent and ascent are working in perfect tandem. And you know, this is exactly how a healthy economy is supposed to flow.
Now, this flowing circulation doesn't just happen in physical space. It operates temporally across the entire universe. The ancients mapped this out as 4 distinct steps: primacy, flourishing,
harvest, and correctness. And these perfectly mirror the seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Every system, whether you're talking about a star forming or a stock market shifting, breathes in and out through this exact four-step rhythm.
Let's look at part 4, humanity's role in cycles.
Because we aren't just passive observers in this vast cosmic machine. Humanity sits uniquely right at the very center of this cycle. Because we possess both mind and body, we act as the mediators. We practice neutralization, or what Daesun thought calls Heiwan Sangsang. This essentially means resolving the grievances and resentments that cause blockages in the system. Whenever an economy or a society gets out of whack, it's the active human action from the center that untangles these systemic knots. That's what restores equilibrium and ensures mutual benefit for the entire cycle.
To really grasp how we mediate, we need to look at the environment we're actually operating in. In this framework, the background forces of nature, which ancient texts often call spirits or deities, are actually described as acting like highly specialized programmatic machines. Think of them almost like the algorithms or the core operating system code maintaining a vast cosmic computer network. They're what ensures the seasons change and the base rules of the universe keep functioning smoothly.
But algorithms need inputs, right? Humans have to actively apply positive and negative feedback to the system. This harmonious interaction is called Senjin Zhonghua. We act as an absolutely crucial return loop. When we see actions that obstruct economic or natural circulation, things that cause imbalance, we have to step in and apply feedback to correct them. This matters deeply, because without human feedback guiding those natural algorithms, the whole economic cycle will just collapse under its own uncorrected deviations. Now, as you process all this, a pretty fascinating question starts to emerge. If everything just repeats endlessly in a closed loop, spring to winter, back to spring again, how do we ever actually achieve progress? How does an economy or even a civilization experience expansion and real growth if it's all just a flat circle? Well, that brings us to our final section, part 5, the spiral of growth.
This concept entirely redefines how we view economic development and cosmic evolution. You see, cycles in nature and economics are not flat, stagnant, repeating circles. They're spirals. The source texts refer to this as a chaosmos, a dynamic combination of chaotic rotational motion and cosmic linear forward motion. Because it is a spiral, every time the cycle revolves, it increases production through what complexity economics calls limit returns. It literally generates new growth and new value with every single revolution.
And we see this spiral phenomenon absolutely everywhere. It's the vast spiral motion of our galaxies. It's the microscopic double helix spiral structure of our very DNA. And in modern complexity economics, it's the mathematical proof that natural circulation actively leads to increasing returns, rather than the diminishing returns we see in those old linear models. This perfectly echoes the core Daesun concept of revolving greatly while simultaneously growing.
As the text puts it, all things produce new things while rotating, growth occurs with each cycle. What this means is that true freedom, robust community, and lasting economic harmony don't come from resisting the cycle. They come from leaning directly into it. By embracing these expanding cyclical ecosystems, we're actually aligning our economic practices with the exact same algorithms that build galaxies and biological life.
We've seen today that linear models inevitably hit a breaking point, while circular systems naturally spiral into continuous growth. So knowing that this ancient cyclical thinking is now mathematically and scientifically validated, how will you apply the principle of the spiral to your own worldview, your business, and your life? The universe is constantly spinning forward, so it's really time to decide how you're going to move with it.